Today we're going to learn a few forms of the verb ser, which means to be, more or less. This is a verb that doesn't really indicate action so much as just fulfilling the verb function in a sentence as the mortar between the bricks. Now, I'll note that this verb doesn't actually always pass the EAT test very easily. Instead, you can recognize this verb where you could see the English word to be or any form of that verb. So look for words like is, are, and am. I'm going to give you some sentences here and see if you can recognize the to be verb in each of these sentences. Food is important. So the verb here is. As you can see, this actually doesn't really pass the EAT test perfectly. Food eats important doesn't work very well. But you can recognize it because it's a form of the English verb to be. Food is important. Here's a longer one. Unfortunately, I am not involved in the planning process. The verb here is am. It's a form of the English verb to be. Unfortunately, I am not involved in the planning process. How are we so mixed up in this? Here the verb is are. So all of these verbs are examples of to be, and that's because the verb to be is not a single word. It's more like a whole family of words that all mean the same thing, but they appear in different ways depending on the context. So let's look at why this is the case. Here's a sentence example. Food is important. The verb here is. If we change the subject food to they, we also have to change the verb. We can't say they is important. We have to say they are important. What we're doing here is called conjugating, or changing the verb to agree with the subject and the context that it goes with. If the person is I, you say am, I am. But if the person is they, you say are. Generally speaking, for the purposes of this challenge, we're going to think of a verb as having 5 types of people associated with it. And we'll use a small memory palace to do this. So there's the I form, which in English would take I am. And we're going to put this at the bottom of the picture. Then there's we, which goes next to it, for we are. Then there's you, which is directly in front of you. There's also he, she, or it, which is one person that goes to one side on the left. And then there's they, which we'll put on the other side. Let's stick with the sentence, you are my friend. As you can see, the verb we use is are in this case, and that's the one associated with the person you. Now see if you can remember what would be associated with I in English. That would be am. What about he? That would be is, and it would be the same thing for she or it. He is, she is, or it is. Now, what about they? You would use are in that case, and then we also takes are, we are. Again, this is called conjugating. All of these words, am, is, and are simply forms of one verb, the verb to be. In this video, we're going to learn the same forms of the verb ser, which means to be. We'll use this same structure with the people in the picture laid out like this, but we'll replace the English verb conjugations of to be with Spanish verb conjugations of ser. You'll notice that in English, we actually reuse forms for the different people. The word are is used for we are, they are, and you are. That's not the case in Spanish. We actually have to learn 5 different forms for all 5 different people. And in fact, as we learn more about this verb this week, we're going to have to learn more and more forms for different tenses, such as the past tense and the subjunctive mood. So we'll use a memory palace to keep all 5 people vivid and interesting. So here's the memory palace. Imagine that you and some friends have gone to an indoor carnival. The bouncy house here is run not by a human, but by a large snake. You're a little freaked out by this, so you're talking about this snake, but you're not talking directly to it, just about it. The snake has everyone lining up and measuring themselves to make sure that they're tall enough to enter the bouncy house. Basically, to pass the test, you have to pass the test of being a tall person. So the question is, are you a tall person or not? Now, unfortunately, the height standards are actually very strict, and you yourself are not tall enough to get in. You're just a few centimeters too short. But to try to pass the test, you've strapped some soy sauce bottles to your feet. They were the only thing that you could find that was handy. You start to declare, I am a tall person. But instead of I am, you accidentally say, I soy a tall person. Meanwhile, your closest friend is someone who's even shorter than you. This friend is an inventive kid with curly red hair and freckles, and he's come up with an invention just for this purpose. It's a hovercraft that blows air down in two vertical columns, or what he calls air rays. These two air rays look something like legs. I mean, it is just air, but it looks like legs. So this kid could pass for a tall person if someone's not looking very closely. He calls the hovercraft his air ray machine. You tell him, wow, now you are a tall person. But by accident, you say, you eres a tall person. This word sounds kind of like air rays with a stress on air. Eres. So to say I am, you say I soy. To say you are, you say you eres. Meanwhile, you're with a group of friends, two of which are tall and two of which are very short. Some of them are tall enough, but some of them aren't. When you try to declare, we are tall people, you accidentally think of the phrase, some of us are tall people. And so you end up saying, we somos tall people. So before we go any further, remember this scene. Associate the word soy with yourself. With your close friend that you're talking to, it's air rays or eres. And then the group of friends around you is somos. We'll go ahead and test this before learning two more words. So how would you say, you are my friend? That would be, you eres my friend. How about, we are the students? We somos the students. I am a diligent worker. I soy a diligent worker. Now let's talk about the snake who represents he is, she is, or it is. This reptile keeps saying es, es all the time, which is a bit creepy. You start talking quietly with your friends about this creature, in particular in reference to the fact that this snake itself is not tall enough to ride the ride. So to say the snake is not a tall person, you say the snake no es a tall person. The word es means is, so you could say he es, she es, or it es. And this is actually the number one most common verb form in the Spanish language. Meanwhile, on the other side of the image, a group of pandas have been waiting next to a window for most of the afternoon. They've been blasted by sunlight for so long that their fur has started to turn red. You remark, wow, they are tall pandas. But you keep thinking about the sun that's burning their fur, and so you say, they son tall pandas. So this word is spelled like the word sun in English, S-O-N, but it's pronounced more like son. So review this scene. Remember what each person represents and what the words are. We're going to test this in some sentence examples. So we'll do a few sentences at random. They'll all pretty much follow the same format. Noun, verb, noun. The point is to try to remember what the correct conjugation of ser is going to be. She is my friend. She es my friend. I am a student. I soy a student. We are tall people. We somos tall people. It is a student. It es a student. You are a diligent worker. You eres a diligent worker. They are not my friends. They no son my friends. I am your friend. I soy your friend. They are the students. They son the students. We are not the best workers. We no somos the best workers. You are my friend. You eres my friend. Keep remembering each of the characters in the scene, especially yourself, the friend with curly red hair, and the pandas, and then your own motley crew of tall and short friends. Your friend with curly red hair will always represent you in this challenge. The pandas will always represent they, and then your group of tall and short friends around you will represent we. So now we've learned 5 forms of ser to use as verbs in sentences. But what about the word ser itself, S-E-R? It's the name of the verb, the name that represents all of these conjugations that we learned. But it's also possible to use this word in sentences, specifically as a noun. It represents the idea of being something. Basically, if you see the word to be or being in English, if you can see that this phrase or word passes the food test, you would use what we call the infinitive in Spanish, ser. For example, I like being a student. As you can see, the whole phrase being a student passes the food test. You could say, I like food. So here you would use ser. I like ser a student. In this case, ser is not the verb in the sentence, it's functioning as a noun. Let's use a couple more examples. Being a student is cool. This phrase, being a student, passes the food test. Food is cool. So you can say, ser a student es cool. The verb here is es. How about, I want to be a good student? In this case, the verb is want. And then to be a good student passes the food test. I want food. So here we would say, I want ser a good student.